What's up, boys and girls? Welcome to an hour with your host, Ranger Matt. I was trying to do the effect where I can come on the TV in the background because you see it shining and glowing, but I guess I just didn't have that special shining time magic Thomas glow that can make that appeal come up and at the moment. But different background setting that I'm in right now in my room, so it's I'm glad to be back. I know I haven't done the show in a while, but I came across an interesting fellow who had a big part in our childhood. Part of the reason why a lot of us that grew up in the 80s and 90s and 2000s why we love trains, and he's important to our legacy. He might even run for president. He would win. But I'm sure, if you grew up in the 90s, I'm sure a lot of you guys know what this is.
Reach for the speed, reach for the whistle, go where the rail may run. Reach for the words, reach for the story, follow the rainbow sun. To a shining time station, where dreams can come true, waiting there for you.
The amazing gentleman is here, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to honor to have this man who is delighting my day. I hope I don't pass out during this interview because I am on point with this. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Mr. Rick, and I'm sorry I didn't talk to him about this before the show. Mr. Rick Sigel
Siggelkow.
Siggelkow. Okay, I got it. Okay, how you doing today, Rick?
I'm doing great, Matt, and thank you so much for having me on. And hello to everyone who watches this. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, I know. I hope at some point a buddy of mine wakes up because he too was a fan of Sharpman Tom and Thomas, and my stepdad who I lost last year, he too was a part of the Thomas. Whenever I had a Thomas day, he was like, "Who's this engine? Who's it?" He was fascinated.
Sorry to hear that.
But. Thank you. No, it's okay. Well, before Thomas, like growing up, like when did you have an interest in getting into film production, and did you also love trains growing up?
Matt, it's funny. I had a huge train set when I was a kid, HO scale, and it was in my parents' basement, and I would just spend hours and hours on that train, playing with that train set. And then we lived out in the country, and if you went over the hill and back of my parents' house, you came out a little railroad station on the B&O line, actually. And I would go, it was like a signal house that looks identical to the one in the opening of Shining Time. And you could go up in it and visit with the guys who threw the switches for the train. So, yeah, It was a lifelong, it had been an obsession of mine even before Thomas came along. And in terms of how I got into this career, and I'm asked this question a lot because I teach at NYU and I teach film students, and they always want to know. It was kind of by default because I'd written a novel in college and it looked like it was going to get published. So I moved to New York City because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. The novel didn't get published, and I had to make a living somehow. So I worked on radio scripts. I worked different odd jobs in television. And then I figured out, well, okay, this is what a producer does. They they pull the whole project together. They hire the people. It's sort of their vision of what the show should be. So I had an opportunity to work at a little TV station in New York where I learned all the stuff that goes into making a TV show, all the mechanics of it. And I thought, well, that's okay. That's, if I can't be a writer, this seems like the next best thing. So I kind of stumbled into it. And then another question people often ask is, well, how did I get into Thomas? So I can just jump to that because it's kind of relevant.
Sure.
So I got a job at WNET, which was the PBS station in New York then. And the head of that station had just been to England. And I was on the elevator with him, and he said, here's a tape that somebody gave me while I was over in England. Take a look at it and see if there's anything we can do with it. I said, I promised somebody, don't get your hopes up. We'll just sort of see what it is. So I took a look, and it was Thomas. And maybe because of my background and my interest in trains, maybe because I kind of a quirky person and children's television appealed to me to begin with. I really liked it, but then I took it home and I showed it to my wife because I wasn't quite sure about it. And she had experience in education, and she just looked at it. She said, "This is terrific. Kids are going to love this." So there were a lot of naysayers in the beginning who said kids weren't going to like it, but I followed my instincts. I knew it was something special, and so that's kind of the long-winded answer to your question.
Well, I will say, and I hope my Barney from France don't get mad when I say this statement, but I was going to say, 'cause I know there were some fans that were a little iffy about Barney, but compared to Thomas, that was a show that had like the trains were friendly and they would get in situations and learn lessons, and all of them were different, had colors, they pulled trains, and it had that really funness to it where I do think fans would have taken a real liking to it. And then it helped that you had also over the years both Ringo and George Carlin as Mr. Conductor on your show as well.
Yes, I think one of your questions was about Ringo and George.
Mm-hmm.
I think you asked memories of Ringo and George. There's really like sort of too many memories to go over all of them.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is they were both remarkable people. They both really loved playing Mr. Conductor because each of them in their own way was kind of childlike, or could be, once they let their guard down when they're away from their audiences. Ringo was sort of I don't know how to put it. I guess if you think about him with the Beatles, he was the funny one.
Right.
He was kind of the quirky, funny one. And doing Thomas and Shining Time, excuse me, I got a frog in my throat.
It's okay.
Doing Thomas and Shining Time, it kind of allowed him to be that again and to just kid around on set and be relaxed, and he could let his guard down. George, off set and off camera, was actually a very quiet man. He was a real writer in the sense that he observed a lot, and he was always taking down notes, and trying to come up with new ideas. And a very sensitive man. And some people look at his stand-up and he's swearing and he's saying all these kind of provocative things. But in reality, he was a very thoughtful guy. And I remember he told Britt and I, when we first approached him, how as a child he used to listen to the radio and how much he loved Danny Kaye and how he would make up stories because he was alone a lot, apparently, as a kid.
Right.
And how being on Shining Time and telling the Thomas stories sort of took him back to that period in his life. So I think for both of them, it was a chance to kind of show the world a different side of themselves, to be playful, to not have to worry about their audience outside that world of Thomas and Shining Time, and just have fun. And I think they both really had fun on the show. I mean, that was my main takeaway.
Well, I will say real quick before I ask the next question, my takeaway was, I knew them from Shining Time, but then years later, okay, Ringo was in the Beatles. I didn't know that. He's a popular man. And then with George, he was this comedian. And I was like, well, I didn't know that about him. And, I seen some of his shows as a teenager. And I was like, whoa, that potty mouth. But both of them did their justice as Mrs. Conductor. And I know I remember loving Ringo's interpretation, his narration for Thomas, and then when George took over, he definitely made it his own and gave all the actors their own personalities. And I love George's style as Gordon over the year, and James. I don't know why, but I loved his version of how he did those two voices.
That's really interesting. Yeah, he really kind of got the engines. Well, you mentioned Gordon and James. I mean, they had really distinct personalities, right off the bat. I mean, I never quite got, I guess I sort of got Toby, but not as much as some of the other ones. But those two, and so he definitely gravitated to that. Ringo would tell the stories almost like a bedtime story.
Right.
Really, I think that was his approach to it. George's approach was to act. to sort of, as you very accurately pointed out, to give a different spin to each engine, try to put a little more personality into it. Ringo's readings might have been a little warmer in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're all suckers for that accent, at least on this side of the Atlantic. But I think George gave it a slightly different spin and maybe breathed a different kind of life into it. I know Britt really loved George's readings.
Mm-hmm.
And they worked, I think, with Ringo. He would come in, he would read, then he would leave. George would spend time trying out ideas and saying, well, how does this one sound? How does that one sound? So yeah, he just brought a different vibe to it.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the questions I had asked, and pardon me for going up and down, but
No, that's okay.
one of the things I had asked, and it's just an opinion, but I know by the time they did Thomas and the Magic Railroad, Alec Baldwin was narrating Thomas, and he was the conductor. At least for you, what do you think that would have been like had Shining Time continued and Alec was Mr. Conductor at that point?
It's a really interesting question. Another one of your questions was my involvement with Thomas and the Magic Railroad. I had nothing to do with that film.
Okay.
Britt and I had parted ways for a period of time, and then we got back together again and remained dear friends until until she passed. I think if Alec Baldwin had stayed with the show and if the show had gone back into production, it would have brought again more star power to it. I mean, the Mr. Conductor role is sort of ironic. He's the shortest person on the show, but he's always the biggest star, which is kind of funny. No, I think he would have made a great Mr. Conductor had the show gone back into production.
Yeah.
Wonderful voice, incredible actor, probably the best actor who did Mr. Conductor in terms of being a real actor, as opposed to George and Ringo, who were, a drummer and a comedian. So it would have been great. It would have been great, but it wasn't meant to be.
I have to say, for me, because when Alec was narrating, I was still watching the show. I had the videos, and I remember whenever he would be interviewed, my mother would like, look, he's not probably going to talk about Thomas. He's probably talking about another movie that he's making. I'm like, well, you don't know. He might mention Thomas. So at that time, I was always curious. Would he talk about Thomas? Would George mention Thomas? I know early on when he was interviewed, he would, but the later years, I didn't get to see him talk about Thomas. But in the end, he did an interview George, and I was happy to hear about that. So again, Thomas was a magical show, and it touched so many people. And I'm sure you saw that when you was a part of the documentary they did with the fans, the Unlike Lake Phantom.
Yes, it's for your viewers who haven't seen it, and I think it's streaming somewhere now. Yeah, it's a wonderful documentary. It's a great documentary. And it was so nice after all these years to reconnect with a bunch of fans who've grown up, but have still, like yourself, Thomas meant something to them and, still means something to them. So that was a great experience. I thought he did a terrific job, and I think it's a great film.
Well, a friend of mine who I went to college with is in that movie, and he wanted me to tell you hello. His name is Ken Findell.
Okay. Hey, Ken.
We went to college together, and he was fascinated with Thomas like me. So when I saw he was in it, I was like, what? So
that's great.
I told him, like, dude, you're a celebrity now. I think because, for me in documentaries, I'm always fascinated with the making of films on the production side, but then seeing that one from the fandom point of view, it amazed me how many fans there are all over the world and how they're still talking about Thomas and they have groups and get together. So for me, that was amazing because from being in Baltimore all the time, I haven't traveled yet. So just seeing all over the world how many fans there are, that blew my mind.
Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it? My daughter and her husband honeymooned in Japan. They climbed up some hill outside Kyoto or wherever. They got to a shrine, and there was a little Thomas model sitting by the shrine. So she took a picture and sent it to me. So that's pretty amazing. And I do get a thrill, whenever I walk through the toy aisle, let's say the store, and I see the Thomas merchandise, and I do feel a connection to that, and I feel a lot of pride that those characters are still bringing a lot of joy to children's lives
Right.
long after it first went on the air here.
Well, speaking of which, because you guys had such amazing kids and actors on the shows, I did come prepared with this particular moment.
What? You are Miss Stacy Jones. Yes. Could you please direct me to the station master?
I am the station master. May I help you?
You're the station... Miss Station Master, this certainly is a lovely train station you have here. Yes, very lovely indeed. But enough about you. Do you see those machines over there? They are all mine. The railroad...
Schemer was something else.
Schemer, it's funny. Dads and boys absolutely love Schemer because they got his humor. He was just a hilarious character. But I did have mom sometimes coming up to me and saying, you really need that much Schemer in the show? Can't you pull it back a little bit? But the show skewed heavily boy, which was great, because a lot of children's shows, at the time weren't necessarily skewing boy. And so PBS was very happy because this was an audience they didn't really have. So that was great. And I think Schemer was part of that. I think later on, Billy Two Feathers, the engineer, was part of that. And then, of course, I don't know what is this affinity between boys and trains, but obviously that was driving a lot of it too. But no, he's a great character. We're still in touch. Very, very funny guy. He was the only cast member who we allowed to ad lib. I mean, we'd write the scripts, and we had a lot of good comedy writers writing those scripts. But Brian O'Connor, who played Schemer, he'd come in and he'd say, well, I want to try this, or I want to try that. And in the beginning, we wouldn't let him. We'd say, no, stick to the script. But as time went by, we realized a lot of times he was coming up with funnier stuff than the writers were. And the physical gags. I mean, he was just a very physical guy. He could fall, he could roll, he could just do all this funny stuff. No, he was a joy to work with. Really, a real talent.
And Miss Dee Dee Khan, Miss Grease. I mean, I'm like, how did y'all get that one? I mean, because even years later today, she still is an amazing, beautiful person, sweet person, and I think she was the best choice to be Stacy.
Well, thank you, and I'm sure Dee Dee would thank you too. The interesting thing about Dee Dee is the person you see on the screen is really who she is. She is that sweet, gentle, caring person that Stacy Jones is in this station. She's really just a terrific actress. I think part of how we got Dee Dee on the show was that Ringo was already attached.
Right.
So when they put out the casting call, we were automatically getting actors at a higher caliber than if we had just been an unknown children's show.
Right.
No, we had some real name actors, auditioning for these roles, which was very interesting. And I think, as I say, Ringo was the initial hook, and then they read the scripts, and then they realized what the show was really about, and became even more enthusiastic.
Well, I'm sure fans will remember this, and I don't know when last time you've seen this, but I had this on video, and this is one of my favorite episodes and moments with them together.
What in the name of boilers, what are you doing in that skirt? The color's all wrong. Yes, Mr. King, sir. I've a good mind to fire every one of you right this minute. Yes, no, Mr. King, sir. JB, he, her.
They had switched places in that episode. Becky makes a wish.
Yes, that was a very fun episode to shoot. And Dee Dee and Brian, I mean, they loved it. They loved being in it. And I think, I remember somebody saying, well, is this kind of like dressing up a man in a skirt and a woman in Schemer's outfit? you kind of getting into a sort of a tricky area here? And my response, and the response of the series advisor, who is a child psychologist, was, no, kids play dress up all the time. And the age of the audience, they weren't going to look at Schemer if he was
has a point. I mean,
trying to be a transvestite or something. I mean, they were just going to look at it as dress up and fun and take it in the spirit that it was intended. But no, that was a hilarious episode because, right, everything goes wrong, right? I mean, all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, that one I had on video, and I remember. I mean, I personally didn't think that. I just figured, they're both switching places and roles and seeing what's it like being in each other's shoes, and seeing Dee Dee, Stacy in general being like schemer, who's always she's calm and quiet. Now she's the schemer. I thought that was a funny trend. So
it was very funny. Yeah, it worked really well.
And real quick, I got to pay tribute to the late great Mart, who was JB. We just saw in the scene. He recently passed away, and I thought he was
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Very, very sweet man. He'd had a huge career in the soaps.
Yes, he was on Guiding Light. Yes.
Yeah, he was like famous in that world. But he really loved the show, again, for some of the reasons I think that George and Ringo did, which is he got to show a different side of himself. And he loved playing the straight man. He loved the pompous sort of know-it-all role that was. He was great. He was really a very sweet man.
Well, I knew him from Shining Time first. So when I found out looking at old episodes of Guiding Light, he was on there. I was like, I didn't make the connection at first, and I was watching Shining Time. I'm like, wait a minute, is that him? That's the same. Okay, so
Yep. Great guy.
Well, this is one of the comments I sent to you. I'm sure that you remember this and fans remember this as well. And this is something that still touches my heart even today. So,
This old train's on its way to a town by the river. You can hear the whistle blowing for many miles away. There's an old hobo standing in the train full of letters and
yeah.
what song? Yeah.
It's a beautiful song. Is from the Christmas special. Written and sung by somebody named Kevin Roth, who's a very, very talented singer-songwriter, and it was shot by a director named Frank Vitale, who was, just had a fantastic intuitive feel for images. And I remember when Frank came up with the idea. I mean, Kevin did the song, and I wasn't quite sure about it at first because Christmas, we think of Christmas as, it's all about presents and gifts and, having a good time, basically. But as we talked more and more about it, it was sort of like, well, no, let's go back to what it's really about, which is about, charity and thinking of others, and that there are people who are alone at Christmas. And so it kind of became a much bigger theme for us to work with.
Right.
He wrote the song, and then I gave it to Frank Vitale. And then Frank came back with the description of how we wanted to shoot it. And I wasn't quite sure if it was going to work, but I so trusted Frank, and I knew it was such a good song. They said, fine, let's shoot it. And I think it's a real classic. I think it's wonderful. I was going to a Unitarian church in New York at the time, and the pastor, his son was a big fan of Shining Time, and he actually, in the middle of his sermon, he stopped and he said, "I just want to compliment one of our parishioners." He had me stand up, and he said, "The song about the hobo," he said, was so moving and so much the spirit of what that holiday is about once you get past the commercialism. So thank you for playing that. That's a wonderful moment in in the history of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have that one on video, but when I saw it years later, and I know there's a fandom website where they interview some of you guys, and that was one of the questions they brought up. And I looked into it, and I was like, wow. So that's why and when I emailed you, I said that song makes you feel like it's Christmas time. You want to go on a train ride somewhere in the mountains, and just it has a peaceful remedy with it. And then of course y'all had Kevin, who also did the theme for Chinatown Station. He
Yes.
sung that song as well. I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful song and beautiful magic. So
Well, thank you. And if Kevin sees this, which he may, thank you to Kevin, because he really he took it in that direction.
mm,
I just want to point something else out now that you mention it, which is one thing we tried to do on Shining Time was to be a different kind of kid show, in the sense that we would sometimes tackle issues that other kid shows did not get into. We did a show about bigotry, and at the time people felt like, oh, that's kind of far afield for you guys. But in later years, many people have come back to that show as an example of why don't kid shows do things like this? Why aren't they talking about issues like this? Because nobody's born a bigot.
right.
It's something they learn, and that show tried to put it in a context the kids could understand. So we did a lot of things like that, and just in little ways and sometimes in big ways, because we realized we had an opportunity to make a different kind of kid show. Anyway,
Well,
that's
oh,
my
no, yeah, no, that's fine. I was gonna say, I don't know if it was just a combination of you guys and Brit, but what I like too, and this wasn't one of the questions, but I was gonna say, I liked how whatever life lesson episode y'all did of Shining Time, it would somehow resonate to similarities in the Thomas episode, and it'd be similar to the theme of that episode of Shining Time.
right. Yeah, Thomas. We would look at the Thomas episodes, and then we would say, okay, so what's this episode about, really? A lot of times it was about being too prideful or not listening or just charging ahead, without thinking things through. And so then we would extrapolate from that and say, okay, that will build the story around the Thomas episode. So Thomas was always really obviously at the heart of the show.
Right.
Really, that's where we took our cues. And so the writers, we would sit down, we'd look at the episodes. What happened by the second season was that we would see the Thomas scripts in advance before they were shot. And that would give me an opportunity to have some input into the scripts.
Right.
Because the US audience at that point had gotten so much bigger than the UK audience that the center of gravity sort of shifted to the United States. And then we would have those Thomas scripts somewhat revised, sometimes more times than not. And then we would sit down with the US writers and say, okay, here's the script. Let's start thinking about storylines. So the two really, by the second season, the two were very much in sync.
I agree, and again, the creative spirit of you, Britt, and everybody involved is what made Shining Time what it was. And sadly, the show ended. I mean, were you ready for it to stop at that point? Did you think it could have gone on another year or two?
Oh yeah, it absolutely could have. What I remind my students of at NYU every once in a while is that this is a business, and it takes money to do these things. And it was felt by by certain people, not by Brit, but other people, that 65 episodes and 5 primetime specials was probably enough in terms of financing the show.
Right.
Because, while PBS gave us money, they never cover the whole cost of the production. And I think the feeling was, well, the merchandise was doing really well, that the show had done its job in terms of launching Thomas in the US. And therefore, it was time to, time to move on. And it was around that point when we were all talking about doing a movie. That seemed the logical next step, was to do a motion picture. And for reasons I've gone into in the past, I won't go into now. I had a bit of a falling out with Britt and her husband Angus at that point. They went off and they did the movie, and I went off and I produced other shows. So, and then a few years later, Britt and I reconciled and renewed our friendship, and we're very close in the years that followed that. Close in a whole different kind of way, because I wasn't working with her anymore.
Right.
We were friends at that point. And we did collaborate on some things. It just never, unfortunately, got off the ground. But we did want to work together again. We did want to produce more shows together. We just couldn't seem to find the right combination of things. And Britt really did not want to go back into children's media. And I said to her, Britt, if you and I came up with a kids show again, we could get it greenlit tomorrow. I mean, people would definitely want us to do another kids show. But she really wasn't interested in that. She wanted to do adult things at that point. And,
right.
And I don't blame her. I mean, I completely get that. Kids television it's wonderful, and you can do things in kids television that you can't really do anywhere else in terms of the fantasy and the kind of quirky characters and everything. But it also has its limits. There are obviously subjects you just cannot, nor should you, get into with a children's show. And I think after all those years, Britt was kind of just wanting to try other things.
Well, I mean, on one hand, I kind of get it. Sometimes you need to change after years, but at the same time, it is sad and interesting, because I think the media of what y'all did with Thomas could have worked on another different ideas for another children's show, even if it wasn't Thomas, it could have been something different, and not, I think that would have been interesting. And yeah.
I wish. Well, it's an interesting side story that I don't think a lot of people know, but we did work with Lily Tomlin to do a show based on her Edith Ann character. I don't know if you remember Edith Ann, but Edith Ann was this very I don't know what the word is. She was a little girl, but she got in a lot of trouble. It was a character that Lily Tomlin had created, and we were hired by her company to work with her to develop a children's show based on Edith Ann.
Right.
But we just couldn't seem to the idea that we pitched to Lily Tomlin. I don't think Lily Tomlin, she didn't see the potential in the idea. And so then we went back to the drawing board, and then around then Lily Tomlin kind of lost interest, as people do sometimes. So that never really got off the ground, but that's not something I've actually ever mentioned in public before. So Britt and I did work on that one, and spent a fair amount of time with Lily Tomlin trying to find a show that she would like. The problem there was she had the approval over it, right? I mean, it's her character, it's her name,
right.
And if she was going to put herself out there like that, she had certain rules that she wanted us to follow that sort of worked against making a kid's show. She had ideas of her own. Anyways, it's just an interesting side story. So we almost had another series. It would have been fun, but wasn't meant to be.
No, I'm glad you shared that story, because I never knew that. The only thing I'm just going to say about that was it would have been interesting to see what y'all would have come up with for Chinatown Station's 100th episode, and then maybe season 10 years later, kind of thing. So
we could have kept going. There's no question. We could have kept going. We had a great cast. We had great writers. We had a terrific crew, great directors. No, we certainly could have kept going if the powers to be had wanted to. But so it goes.
Do you think it could work today if y'all did a reboot? I know Britt's no longer here anymore, but if you and somebody were to do a reboot?
I would love to do a reboot. I remember the last day standing on the set, the Shining Time set. It was up in Toronto. We shot up there, and just thinking, gosh, I really hope I get back here someday. I really like, my dream would be to get back on this set someday. I think it would work. I think there's a huge nostalgia for the show. And I think a lot of the people who are nostalgic for the show are parents who would want to bring their kids to the show. It's still recognized, as one of the best kids shows ever created. So I think there's a lot of nostalgia for it. I think it has a lot of cultural cachet. Lightning just doesn't strike twice. So if we're going to do it again, it would be the same format, it'd be the same setting, but it would have to be dealing with other issues, that are relevant to kids today that weren't so relevant then. I remember one writer wanted to do a show about computers in kids' lives. But computers just weren't that big then, right? And so it's kind of like, that doesn't seem quite right for this. Today, obviously, you'd have to address that. It'd have to be part of the show. I think it would just be different, but it's sort of that old saying, different but the same. I mean, you'd want to retain the spirit of the show, the warmth of the show, but you'd want it to get into different issues.
Right.
I mean, it would be great if they could produce the Thomas episodes the way they did back then.
Right.
That would be amazing. But that was a very expensive production, unfortunately.
Right.
And besides that, I think Mattel owns it now.
Right.
They own Thomas, they own Shining Time. And we've gone back to them and we've proposed the idea, but there was just no interest on their part. So until they come around, and I wouldn't hold my breath, but you never know. I mean, they're a smart company, and if they really saw a way to make money off it, they might take a bite, but so far they haven't.
Yeah. Well, I will say, because of my imagination, I don't know if this would have been an episode idea, but because I know y'all did a similar episode involving cleaning called Stacey Cleans Up, but because we went through the COVID era, I had an idea for, like, the kids could learn about, staying clean and germs, and that was kind of like the random thought I had once for an episode.
It would be a great episode. Because one of the great things about setting the show in the train station is that anybody can show up, right? And so I think it's too bad you weren't writing episodes back then. That would have been a good one. And very, very, very kid friendly. Very much something that kids are interested in.
I agree. Yeah, that was just an idea I had once when COVID hit. I was like, that'd be a nice Shining Time episode. The kids are learning about germs and staying clean. I know y'all didn't really do like a bathroom moment, but the kids could learn, you gotta wash your hands. It's just an idea I just had.
No, absolutely. And I imagine, Schemer would be against it for whatever, or he'd be trying to charge people money to use to wash their hands or something. He's such a great foil for the people who wanted to do good things. Schemer always found a way to try to undermine it. Good episode.
Well, I don't know if you was married at the time, but what was your family's reaction when they found out you was a part of this big legacy?
Well, it's an interesting question. My wife was there at the very beginning. In fact, she's the one who came up with the name Shining Time Station.
Oh,
yeah. We were looking through railroad stuff, and we saw a reference to something called Shining Time, which is when the sun hits the rails, and they look like rays of light on the rails. And she said, Shining Time. That might be a good name for your show. So I pitched it to Britt, and Britt thought, oh yeah, that's a great name, and that's how the name came about. My children kind of grew up on the sets. I mean, they would come, they would stay. We'd move to Toronto when we were shooting, and so they spent a lot of time on set. And I think for them, it was just part of their lives growing up. It was just there. Years later, I think they've come to sort of appreciate what a cultural force the show was, because I'm sure when they get together with their friends, and eventually the subject might come up, and their friends are like, "Wait a minute, your dad did Shining Time Station and Thomas?" So I think I think they scored some points with it. But yeah, it was just part of their lives. I mean, they just grew up with it. I don't think they really thought, it's how it is with your parents, right? That's their job. You don't really think that much about it. I think it was only really in later years where they came to appreciate, what it was.
Well, Rick, looking back at your career in life, I mean, what do you think is your personal legacy? I mean, did you ever think as a little boy one day you would be having this adventurous life that you've had?
Oh, well, it's. I hope my legacy is that I brought a lot of entertainment to children's lives, and that maybe and that some of that has carried over into their adult lives in terms of the stories and the lessons and the kind of world that certainly that Shining Time was promoting.
Mm.
And later in my career, I did shows for older kids, a show called Ace Lightning about superheroes, where the real theme of the show is what is it to be a hero in your everyday life? We all have the potential to be heroes. Then I did a show called Dinosapien about evolved dinosaurs, and that was really a show about families, because the dinosaur Eno was separated from his parents, and the hero of the series, Lauren, her father had recently passed away.
Mm.
She was alienated from her mother, and so she had a tragedy in her life to reconcile. And so I just hope that some of those things stay with people, and I hope it was entertaining, and I hope that is something they can carry into their lives, even in some cases subconsciously, because a lot of the viewers in Shining Time, and I did another series called Naughty that was similar to Shining Time. They may not remember the exact episodes, but maybe they remember the vibe, and maybe they remember that feeling of sort of togetherness and people who respect each other, people who have problems, but they resolve their problems without resorting to violence or anger or name calling. But those, I think, are really important lessons. Hopefully that carries forward. So if that was my legacy, I would be very happy.
Well, I will say it definitely carried over to a lot of kids, especially me. And I said I was going to show some things. My Thomas tracks, I still have
Oh,
this
yes,
bag.
absolutely.
It's kind of been dubbed, but this is one of my last few Thomas DVDs that I had. It was Percy's
Oh,
Chocolate Crunch.
that's great. That's great.
And I still got some of the toys. That's the dragon.
Oh, yeah,
That was in
sure.
Thomas, and I still got. There's a Diesel Gold. It was some kind of
Oh,
DVD,
yeah. Yeah, why is he gold, I wonder?
but so I still got all my Thomas toy. His little Rusty.
Oh, yeah. Sweet engine.
Did you ever visit the set when they was filming the Thomas?
Oh, yeah. It was in Shepperton. It was quite amazing set. It was just this enormous train set,
Right.
with trap doors and cameras suspended, on wires above it. And because they were shooting on 35 millimeter, big cameras that they had to move around with these tiny little landscapes. The director, David Minton, was a terrifically talented man. And he just loved us. It was wonderful to hear him talk about it, because he really got those engines. And yeah, he was an extraordinary man, actually, who had done many other things, but I don't know, somehow he really found himself with Thomas.
No, I agree. I think he did an amazing job as a director, and all the stuff they filmed, like the night scenes, the day scenes, rain, snow, when the trains would have like accidents. They did an episode where Henry was pulling the flying kipper and had an accident, and like they all shot these episodes so concise, and even in them earliest before CGI, even that first season, it was something that made Thomas stand up. Yeah.
No, they're beautiful. They're like little mini feature films.
Right.
Yeah, they're amazing. I wonder sometimes if it really the excuse that I've heard over the years is that it was too expensive to shoot them that way. But I wonder I mean, CGI isn't cheap.
Right.
And the beauty of the way they shot them was, well, once you shot it, was finished, right? With CGI, it just takes forever to generate those images.
Right.
Months and months and months of, a bunch of animators sitting in a room rendering out these images. Now, with AI, maybe that will change. I think that will probably speed up that process quite a bit. But I still wonder if the argument holds water, that it's cheaper than shooting it live action like they did. And certainly you can't replicate that look.
Right.
It's just so unique to Thomas.
Well, I remember my buddy Ken and I was talking about this, what I mentioned earlier, and I told him the interesting thing about the CGI, I will give him credit for, is with the mouse moving, you can understand it gives different vocal to the engines, but I missed the shooting of the models, like you was talking about, because it gave a surrealness to the shows and to the engines with having the models on set versus the CGI work. I mean, it really gave a real surrealness, and that goes back to David Minton directing that. So
yeah, the models had weight.
right.
The models felt real in a way that the CGI, for whatever reason, never quite felt as real. I mean, when Thomas crashed into the house and got the bush on his mouth,
Yep.
you really believed it,
Right.
Because when he crashed through there, that little model of Thomas was really crashing through the fence and really crashing into the wall of that house. So yeah, there's just something you get with using real model engines like that I just don't think CGI, for all the good things CGI can do, it just never quite brought back that sense that you were on a play set, that this was your model train layout coming to life,
Right.
really coming to life. And then that last iteration of Thomas, the one All Engines Go, I think it was called, the
Right.
2D version. Britt and I talked about that quite a bit. She did not like she did not like that at all. I guess my feeling was that if Thomas hadn't had such a great history before that series,
Right.
if that series had come out and nobody knew anything about Thomas, right? It was the first time they were experiencing Thomas, it probably would have been okay. But because Thomas had such a great history and such high production value over the years, even the CGI was high production value. I mean, they did a good job. That it just sort of cheapened the brand, and it made the engines not like engines anymore. I mean,
Right.
they were just animated characters. They could have been any train at that point. So that I think it really diminished the property. It was ill-advised, and I know the people who worked on it, and I know that they were trying to reinvent the franchise. They were under a lot of pressure, but what they came up with didn't do Thomas any favors.
Right.
That's my opinion.
No, you're entitled. So yeah. I was gonna say I got some friends that want to say hi to you if I can get the camera right.
Oh my gosh, there they are! Wow.
Edward, James, Percy, Chocolate Up, and Thomas.
Yeah.
Does it amaze you too? I mean, it was in the fandom documentary as well, but even today with Thomas' legacy, there are fans who have their own Thomas toys and models, and they've been recreating a lot of the episodes from their own business.
Yeah.
So
I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic. I went to a train show in New Jersey, invited by some Shining Time fans, but of course there were a ton of Thomas fans there, and I was just blown away by some of the setups that they had. I mean, really fantastic. It's just a shame. I guess Mattel threw out all the old props and the sets and everything of the original Thomas episodes, but some people, managed to fish it out of the trash, and they've actually preserved some of that stuff. But what a waste!
yeah,
The craftsmanship that went into those sets. A real waste. I was gone by then. I just heard about it, but
right.
a real shame.
Well, what's it like for you today in your life? What are you up to? And I know you said you teach at NYU. What's it like now working with a new generation of filmmakers? And I'm sure a lot of them grew up with Thomas.
Yeah, that's sort of they all seem to know about it before they even take my classes. Um, well, I'll be honest, I'm loving it. I didn't think I'd never taught before, and what happened was I had a show with Ron Howard's company, Imagine Entertainment, and it was a teenage show, and we were going to shoot it in Ireland, and then it was a great show. It was called The Last Druid, and then COVID hit, and Ron Howard's company said, you know what? Until this thing settles down, we're not going to be shooting on location anywhere.
Right.
And I knew that was kind of the end of that show. I mean, I just knew once in this business, when people put you on a shelf, you almost never get off that shelf again. And so I kind of thought, well, that's okay. That's kind of I've hit my shelf life. You know, I've had a great career. I've produced a lot of shows. Maybe it's time for me to think about retiring. So that was the downside of COVID. The upside was at NYU, where I had done some lectures, had a big backlog of students because of COVID, and they needed new teachers. So they called me up and they said, "Can you come in and teach this course? Just try it out, just see what it's like." And I found out I really enjoyed it. I loved being around these students who really want to be filmmakers, and they want to produce TV shows, and they very genuinely are interested in what they can do creatively. So I found out that I really liked it, and I've been there almost 6 years now. So it's been a great second career for me. I love teaching. I love the kids, and NYU has a lot of resources. So they have a lot of equipment. So I'm very familiar with that. I get to teach a course in a TV studio, and I get to teach another course where we shoot on location. So both of those things, which I've had a lot of experience in, I get to bring to my students. So it's been a great experience. Now, sometimes I'm asked, would you produce a TV show again? And the answer is, well, yeah, sure. You know, it was the right show for me. Yeah, I would do it in a heartbeat. But what I don't want to do is all the stress and time and effort that it takes to pull a show together, to take it out, to pitch it, to be on pins and needles for months on end to know whether or not somebody's going to pick up the show. That stress I'm happy to be without. It's a hard job developing a show and pitching it and raising all that money, and then the producing part's wonderful, but all the stuff you have to do before that is actually very stressful.
Well, Rick, I know we're pressed with time, but I'll ask you three last questions before I let you go real quick.
Please.
The first one is, what kind of music do you listen to?
I saw that question on your list here, and I was thinking, man, I don't know how to answer that. I listen to all different kinds of music. Again, one nice thing about working at NYU with college students is that they introduce me to music, and so I can stay current with that, or sort of current. But I grew up in the 70s, and so I still listen to a lot of 70s stuff, right? And I don't have favorites. I think it depends on my mood. Because a lot of times I listen to music in my car, right? So if I'm in a long drive, I'll end up finding myself listening to oldies, I guess, for whatever reason. If I'm just driving from my house, which is north of New York City, into the city, I'll listen to more current stuff. I don't know why. Shorter trips, current stuff. Longer trips, I go back into the past and listen to oldies. So that's it. But I pretty much love all kinds of music, including classical music and even some opera arias. Of course, the Beatles, the guys I grew up with.
That doesn't count. He was on your show.
But it's very funny with Ringo. We were sort of under instructions not to talk about the Beatles, right? was kind of like, don't talk about the Beatles. That was the past, and he's not into that anymore. And then one day I was walking by his dressing room, and I heard Beatles music playing, and it was early Beatles. So I went in and I just had a great conversation with him about those years with the Beatles. So it wasn't that he didn't want to talk about it. It's just that he didn't want to be known only as the drummer for the Beatles. He wanted to be known for his acting. He wanted to be known, for new music and other bands that he'd been working with and so on. So, obviously the Beatles will always be a favorite.
Yeah.
For all sorts of reasons. They were an incredible band.
Well, I hope they catch him one day, because I know that was a question I was going to ask Ringo personally. Would he have loved it if they had made a cameo appearance on Chinatown one day? So.
Well, it's funny because there was one day we were shooting and Paul McCartney was in New York, and Ringo was seeing him. And I said to Britt, well, do you think we can get him to come on the show? And Britt was like, no, don't go there. Don't broach that. And you have to also remember that Chinatown was produced after John Lennon had been murdered.
Right.
So there was we had to have armed guards around. We had to, hire people to basically protect Ringo, because you never know if some crazy person out there wants to follow up on what happened to John Lennon. So there was a certain amount of tension in that sense. I mean, also he's one of the most famous people in the world. So when you're around someone that famous, you realize that their life is different, right? They're just things they can't do. They can't just go down to the corner and buy some milk, right? Because they're going to be mobbed by people. Everywhere he went, he's so recognizable. People would just come out of the woodwork, and want autographs or want to talk to him. So there was always a little bit of tension around Ringo because of those things.
Well, sadly, we lost Britt last year. Anything that stood out, memories of her?
Oh gosh, where do I start? There's so many. Well, Britt and I were really close. We really understood each other. We were able to, we could talk to each other about anything really going on in our lives. I think about her a lot. I miss her a lot. I was very surprised when her daughter called me and told me that she died. I knew that she'd been having some health issues, but I didn't think they were that serious. And it was very spooky, Matt, because I had a voicemail on my phone from her from 2 days before she died. And she was just like, oh, hi, Rick, just thought about you, can call me back. And, it bothers me because I didn't call her back right away, because I figured, well, I'll catch up with her, and I deleted the voicemail. And it's just, I wish I'd kept it, but how was I to know?
Yeah.
She was a very, Britt was a complicated person. And I think that, some of the people who talk about Britt, to know the whole person was to understand that she was very creative. She was a very unique person. But, some people really didn't like Britt. I mean, there are people out there who really, chafed against Britt, partly because she was a woman in a man's world, and she didn't take guff from anybody. But she would go into a meeting and she'd be very tough and very, direct with people. But after the meeting, she'd be kind of a nervous wreck. She didn't like having to do that. And I think that created, that was hard for her.
Right.
Because she would fight for Thomas, and she wouldn't mince her words. But then after the meeting, we'd go out together and she'd be almost hyperventilating, because that really wasn't who she was.
Right.
Who she had to be to do what she did in this world. So she was, Yeah. As I say, there's so many memories. I can't really
Yeah,
get into them, but just to say that I really miss her. She was a special person. I'm just really glad that she had come into my life
yeah,
and that we were able to collaborate. And then we had a falling out for reasons having really not anything to do with me and Britt. There are other reasons for that, external reasons. But the casualty of that was that we went through a period where we didn't talk to each other, and then we ran into each other at a festival, a film festival, and we just kind of fell into each other's arms because we really missed each other, and it was just a wonderful moment of like, why weren't we friends? Why weren't we still friends? Why did this split happen? And like a lot of things, when you have a falling out with somebody, you look back and you say, well, that was kind of silly. That was petty. Like, why did that happen? And then so for many years after that, we were close. We'd see each other. I'd always stay at her place in California. When she came to New York, we'd always spend time together. I got very close to her grandchildren, two wonderful boys. So, anyways,
yeah. No, I'm glad you shared that. I didn't speak with Brie. I never met her, but I sent her a message via Facebook, and I think she did see my message saying thank you for what she did. And I was like you, everybody else. I was shocked because y'all were just at the premiere for the documentary, and she seemed. I know she was older, but she seemed fine. So when she passed, that did shock me as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was worried about her at the documentary. I did send. I'm so glad I had that time with her. That was the last
Mhm.
time I saw her. We talked after that, but that was the last time I saw her. But I could see that she was frail,
Right.
and I was a little shocked by just how frail she was. Um, because just talking to her on the phone, and I hadn't seen her in about a year, and all we'd done is talked on the phone up to that point. So I was a little surprised, and I'm so glad she went. She almost didn't go, but then I talked to her and I just said, Britt, how many more opportunities are we going to have to do something like this?
Right.
And she really liked the movie, and so she wanted to go and she wanted to support the movie, and I'm just so glad she did.
Yeah.
That was her last public appearance. What a great appearance that was for her.
Yeah. I'm glad she went too. And I know you gotta go, sir. But the last thing I'll have you do real quick, I'm just not leaving, just zooming in on you. Is there any message or anything you want to say to the fans of Shining Time?
To the fans of Shining Time and Thomas, I just want to say thank you so much for the way you have kept these characters alive, and how you've expressed how much they meant to you then and how much they continue to mean to you. You have no idea how gratifying that is for me, and you're all terrific. I wish I could meet every one of you, but thank you for everything. That's my message.
Well, that was beautiful, and I'm glad that we was able to do this. It was a pleasure to meet you. Even though I still want to pass out because you meant a lot to my childhood, Rick and
Thank
Britt
you,
as
man.
well. And I love trains now. Now I will say y'all slightly. I won't say y'all traumatized me, but whenever we went to the market, my mom and me, we would get a shopping cart, and when done, I would throw it against another shopping cart. My mom would be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "The shopping carts are freight cars. They're misbehaving. They're not going right."
That's perfect. That's perfect.
I
Yeah.
did that for years because of that, and I was like, "They're troublesome freight cars. They're not moving right." So you push it against the other one and get them going.
That's great. I love it. I love it.
Well, Rick,
No,
I'm going to stop our show, and I'll say one thing to you off camera. But thanks for coming on my podcast show. It's been a blessing to meet you, and from my heart to yours, thank you for your part in making my childhood possible. Thank you.
well, thank you for having me. It's been a genuine pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming by my show, The Range of Mad Hour. I'll be back soon with another guest. Normally, I roll the end credits, but I'll leave you guys with this last moment.
Thomas
Bye
is a
bye.
tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor.
He's a cheeky little engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome.